Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the RPE podcast, where we aim to bridge the gap between rehab and performance. Today, we are back with another research review. Last time, we discussed when to have an ACL reconstruction. So make sure to go and check that episode out if you haven't listened. Today, we'll be talking about goal setting. I'm your host, Connor, and back to the podcast this week after a short hiatus is Steve. He wasn't sacked. It was a joke. We need him on this podcast. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. I'm just riding my bike. So, as I said, I reckon a little bit of Mark Ronson bicycle would be a good intro theme song to this.
I might do a special intro for today's episode. Mark Ronson
What
bicycle.
was the when do I need to get a? I wouldn't listen to you guys without my sweet tones on it. So when do I have to get an ACL repair? Is it tomorrow?
Yes, definitely, all the time, without a doubt, get an ACL repair.
Okay.
It would be a disservice to you if you didn't get it.
What happens if I haven't even ruptured my ACL?
Just repair it.
Prophylactic?
Prophylactic. Thicken it. Just double down. That was a thing, hey. We didn't even cover that.
Cool. Sounds good.
I
did listen. You did well. That's
Thanks,
a good
mate.
kid.
We did get a little bit of feedback on it. People did miss your voice. And for that reason, this week we've sacked Nathaniel. So no Nathaniel this week. He's off on leave in New Zealand.
All for the better, I reckon.
Probably. Playing golf by the looks of it.
When's he not playing golf?
I don't know. Like, when he plays golf, is he even really playing golf, or is he just hitting the ball?
I'm skeptical as to whether or not he works.
Yeah, I'm skeptical as to whether he's actually improved at golf with all this golf he's been playing as well.
Too much focus on the magnification of error technique, mate.
He's just magnified his errors and not improved. No, he's
I think back to a couple of research reviews ago.
Yeah. And make sure to check that one out. It was actually it's our most listened to research review so far. So it was.
I was there, mate.
Yeah.
I don't need to check it out. I'm all good.
Correlation is equal to causation.
Nice. I know you're talking to the listeners at home.
Steve being on the podcast.
Didn't nearly get my voice actually tonight. I'll wait for this for the what did you learn part.
Mate,
wait, listeners. There'll be more to come later.
Let's just dive into the what did you learn then. I'm keen to hear it. What did you learn this week?
I learned that you can have like an acute, I guess, laryngitis without any other like symptoms of sickness or anything. I just come Friday last week or Thursday last week, started losing my voice halfway through work Friday. It was almost gone. Saturday, basically gone. Sunday, started coming around again, then went over to a friend's house, chatted to a friend for an hour, and I was like, fuck this. There's no way I'm going to be able to work tomorrow and see all these new patients because after chatting to people for about an hour, my voice just tanked. So
yeah,
I don't know. And then yesterday, come pretty good. I had S&C coaching rehab group last night, and it was just starting to squeak around. And today seems to have just got through, but I do feel like I need to clear my throat every now and then. So that'll be good for the listeners.
The squeak is back.
That's right.
I'll see if I can work some magic editing out some coughs and whatnot. I don't think I'm that good though. This is a hobby, not a job.
Nice.
So you learned that laryngitis can have no other symptoms other than loss of voice. What, you didn't get a sore throat or anything?
No, it was really, really random. So yes, that's what I learned. And I've been listening to, again, why zebras don't get ulcers. So I've been relearning and reconceptualizing a lot of allostasis type of stuff, which is sick.
A topic we'll probably get into in a future episode because it's super interesting, and I don't think I'll get tired of why zebras don't get ulcers. That's a cracker. For anyone who hasn't listened to it, highly recommend. There's an audiobook version as well. Hey, that's what you've been listening to.
Yeah, that's what I'm listening to. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So I learned this week there was what
did you learn, Connor?
Oh, thanks for asking. There was a video going around on Instagram and Facebook about the Maasai people who live in Kenya, or Maasai. I didn't want to butcher it, but anyway, that's their name. And they're ability for plyometrics, they just had mad hops, like literally touched the ground for like an absolute split second and then got back to like, I don't know, 50 inches in the air. It was crazy. So
I did see that one.
I looked into it and I was like, oh, I wonder what ceremony this is. And it turns out that it's like in that particular race of people, or that culture, I should say, they don't, it's one of their rituals to like become a man or like to becoming an adult. So first the boys get like taken away and do their own thing away from the girls, and they have to learn to be independent. And then when they come back, one of the things they do is this jumping festival. And essentially the higher you can jump, the more like attractive you are to women. So
no, mate, there you go. The eccentric utilization ratio, as I said, unless you're over 1.1, you're not a man. I've said that. I've always taught that.
You've always thought that?
No, I've always taught that at my courses.
Oh, okay.
That's why when yours was like 1, I was just like, what are you even doing?
I'm a boy. I'm not a man yet.
Yep.
No, I have been working on it. But anyway, that's a rite of passage to becoming a man. So I'm going to continue to work on my eccentric utilization ratio and hopefully become a kangaroo.
That's right. Exactly. The most manly of the marsupials. Yes.
Yep, nailed it. But what an incentive, what a goal to like jump the highest so that you can procure a mate in your tribe.
Mate, that's how I did it.
You just like went to the park and showed Sarah how high you could jump, and that worked.
That's it.
Cool. Well,
it's a cross-cultural phenomenon.
All right then. So we do have a paper today. We have a very interesting paper. It was another kind of long one after the short one last week, but it was say again?
It's massive.
Not too bad. It's about 12 pages, I think. So it was published in October 2018 in the Journal of Frontiers in Psychology out of Switzerland. The title is How Focusing on Superordinate Goals Motivates Broad Long-Term Goal Pursuit, a Theoretical Perspective. 3 main authors. We have Benita Hockley, Adrian Brugier, and Claude Messner. So essentially, this paper looked at types of goal setting and goal setting theory, and then they tried to look at, there's essentially a research review and a literature review. And once they'd done their literature review, tried to expand on it with some theories. So what they did was it's not really like your normal literature review. It's kind of, they've just used a lot of evidence to inform their position, and then they set up essentially what goal setting was, and then they discussed about how they could progress it into something that hopefully works better for people when they do goal setting.
It's almost like the outline for an evidence-based course, or the outline for a updated textbook on goal setting or something. That's how it has a innate kind of bias that they are coming from, which I fully agree with. I love the way that the Scandinavians and all those type of people kind of think about, our people and how we can help people flourish more than a lot of other countries seem to care about. So, but they do have that kind of bias, and it is finding the research to discuss why they have that bias is how I would describe the paper.
So there could be a little bit of confirmation bias in and about this, but this was, so essentially they talk about the idea of superordinate and subordinate goals, something that I came across after listening to a Stronger by Science podcast a couple of years ago, I think probably. But yeah, it just gave me a really... Say that again?
I share that podcast all the time to people.
Yeah, it was awesome. But it gave me like a different outlook on how to do goal setting with people, or how that goal setting can most effectively be employed. Because before that, at uni, all we got told was SMART goals. And I don't like the SMART acronym is dumb.
Yeah, I would. Well, so as you know, I'm a tutor at uni, a sessional academic, and that's what we teach in ours for the behaviour change bit. And every year we talk about how we need to kind of update it and whatnot. And the hardest, funniest bit is having to mark students on the SMART, where like S is worth 1, M is worth 1, A, and I'm like, I have no idea. I was like, and if you miss out on the A, like, how do you know if it's R? You know, there's like, so someone's either gets like 1 mark or they get like all the marks. It's like, and the things like, it just doesn't feel intuitively like it's set up well or does anything. And like each thing doesn't really feed well into the other thing.
Well, it was adapted from like business, and it was just being like, I don't know, we've tried to make it fit our profession. I don't think it really does. So if you're not familiar with the SMART acronym, the S is for specific. So your goal should be specific. Measurable, it should be measurable. But if it's specific, then it's probably a pretty similar thing anyway. A is for attainable. So it should be something that you can attain. R is for like realistic or realism. So I don't really see what the difference between the A and the R are. If it's attainable, then of course it's realistic. And then timed.
If it's specific, it's going to have to be like that realistic and attainable, like those three almost go together. Like it's a weird, you can't have one without the other.
Unless it's like a completely outrageous goal, like to land on the sun next week. Yeah. And the T is for timed. So there has to be like a timed component to it. So we were always told that they were like the good proponents of goal setting. That's what you should aim for when you're doing goal setting. But what this paper is saying is kind of to do the opposite. So essentially, I've highlighted this here. Goal setting theory shows across hundreds of studies that challenging, specific, and concrete goals are powerful motivators and boost success in goal pursuit more than do vague and abstract goals. So we would get told to stay away from abstract goals like be healthier or become more athletic or be a better person, like really vague, abstract, deep kind of identity-based goals more so. We've been told to stay away from them, but this paper is actually advocating for using them in conjunction with subordinate goals.
How do you feel? So SMART goals, does that pass the just the intuitive gut feel test to you? And then like vague, we won't kind of go into because we'll talk about what superordinate and everything is, but like more like broad term pie in the sky goals, how does that sit with you as far as like passing the smell test kind of thing?
Well, I think like the short-term goals are important to have. And yes, they can be specific, and yes, they can be in a short period of time. Like if you have a goal to, for instance, in rehab, like I want my knee to feel good enough to play football in 3 weeks. Like that's pretty specific. It's a concrete goal. It's time-based. Like that's fine. But like the longer term goal is, why do you want to play that game? Like maybe it's a grand final, or maybe it's a scout game you're getting trialed, and that's going to go to your longer term goal, which is become the best footy player of all time or something. So like, I think it's important.
And to me, there's like, when we're then going into superordinate goals or anything, it's deeper than that again.
For sure.
Like that to me is intermediate still. But we'll talk through that soon.
Yep. So usually this is something else that the paper highlighted. When facing such long-term challenges like becoming a great footy player, goal setting theory suggests the goal setter should subdivide abstract long-term goals or superordinate goals into specific concrete short-term goals or subordinate goals in order to enhance both motivation and performance. So essentially they're making a hierarchy where essentially the most proximal goals to you, so the shortest time frames, are your subordinate goals. And that could be things like, I've got to get to the gym twice this week. And that feeds into your next level in the hierarchy of becoming a good athlete, which is essentially feeding into your next level or your superordinate goals of potentially, I don't know, being healthy for a long time or becoming famous, or I don't know, something along those lines. They step it out in this hierarchy where, yeah, like you said, pie in the sky goals are superordinate. So I think probably let's dive into superordinate goals a little bit more and just like outline some of the characteristics of what a superordinate goal is, just so that when we go to apply it, we have a good understanding of what it is.
Yep. So, I give this this mentoring session to our new grads now for kind of 2 years in a row. Again, first found about it from Stronger by Science, and then read the paper a couple of years ago, and yeah, like reference it heavily since. And we give it about kind of week 6 at a time where we feel that like hopefully they've got 1 or 2 of these clients that like getting at the surface level stuff isn't enough for them. Like, you know, getting the reason why that person is either going to engage in their plan, or if they need to change behavior or whatnot. You kind of got to get to that deeper. And like, if you take it from all that, like, you know, crappy capitalist-y kind of thing, that Simon Sinek, what's your why? It kind of fits into all that stuff to me. Mm-hmm. So like that superordinate goal, I've always kind of correlated it, I guess, with that why, your compass, your kind of the what type of direction are you going in life, and like why are you going in that direction? What is that innately achieve in you? And usually keep asking why further and further. I think in philosophy, one person, I can't remember who it is, but there's a famous thing that like the only innate goal that has no other kind of thing behind it is like happiness, you know what I mean? So whatever it is, that this superordinate goal is something that for some reason we innately feel that is going to drive us towards a happier kind of existence.
Yep.
And for different people, that is a different kind of thing, you know what I mean? But when you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, it's like, why? Well, that's going to drive me towards what I feel is going to make me happier. And there's no like, why do you want to be happier? I fucking do.
Like, why wouldn't I want to be happier, bro? Like, do you want me to be sad?
Yeah.
But no, that's exactly right. So it's like a value-based thing, like it's an identity-based thing, your superordinate goal it's something that you can imagine yourself being, or somewhere that you want to be, or so. Yeah, it's who you want to become, or who you see yourself being happy being.
Or even who you see yourself as now and want to kind of maintain
it.
Yeah. So it's your compass that derives hopefully any decision or any goal that sits under that. If you don't like, well, we'll talk into this later, but you get cognitive dissonance and you get falling off your goals, etc. If you if those goals don't align with that superordinate goal. And a superordinate goal is usually kind of intrinsically motivated. So it has, whether or not you look like self-determination theory or something, there's going to be some parts of that where like it's something that you like have autonomy over, or there's relatedness in it, or you're very competent. Like there's going to be those things that drive intrinsic motivation that's automatically kind of built into that like superordinate why I want to do what I'm doing.
Yep, definitely.
Whereas like your lower level stuff, our smart stuff, is like extrinsically motivated goals, really.
Usually.
Yeah.
It's usually like a target that someone else has set us to get us on the way to somewhere, or just or they're usually pretty arbitrary as well. They don't really have a lot of meaning behind them. They can, unless you're relating them to these superordinate goals, they can completely lack meaning.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just interesting that like the deeper into the goal levels that you go, the more intrinsic that motivation has to kind of become. Like it just won't work if it's an intrinsically motivated thing, because you'll just be like, well, that's not really me. I'm only doing it because like I'm chasing some sort of reward rather than I'm doing it innately for myself. So there is some very interesting conversations that you don't have to get into with every patient, but like sometimes it's very useful to get into.
And it can be that moment of realization for people as well. Like if they perceive themselves as a certain type of person, but there's a behavior that isn't congruent with that, and you make them aware of it, or you just ask them about it, like you said, it can put that cognitive dissonance in their brain of being like, okay, maybe I do need to change this behavior because, for instance, if my goal is to be healthy, which is going to make me happy, then like, I don't know, smoking or like doing drugs all the time isn't going to like contribute to that positively. So maybe I need to think about this a bit more. Okay, what short-term goals can I set to stop smoking, blah, 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 blah. And that's going to have more meaning than if someone just goes, you should stop smoking.
That's right, exactly. Why the fuck am I riding a bike right now?
Yeah. Why are you riding a bike, Steve? Break it down.
Oh, it's just, this is usually, so some of my intermediate goals are, or subordinate goal, I like to see myself as a healthy person because
superordinate goal.
Seeing myself as a happy person as a healthy person makes me kind of happy. And it means that I'm going to be happy for my family, etc. So there's maybe that extra little level there, but really mostly happy for myself, happy for my family. So me going, cool, I've given myself 2 days per week that I can kind of train. One of them is a Wednesday night, which we book our sessions in on. And then I get an optional third day and a couple little like off the back cardio sessions that I get to do. So, this is something that is enabling me to kind of still meet that goal of going, cool, what can I do to be a happy person still? But then also meeting up with family, friends, that type of stuff is also very important to me. Because again, being a happy, healthy person for my family is kind of and for myself is a big superordinate goal. So doing this podcast also brings me a lot of joy for that. So combining the two things together, and I'm just like, oh.
Yeah. So that's probably a pretty good segue that you've combined two goals, because something that people often do is they have to pick which goal they want to prioritize, and one goal gets put on the back burner. But under this theory of subordinate, intermediate, and superordinate goals, you can be working on like multiple goals at the same time that can feed into a superordinate goal. So instead of like black and white, okay, I didn't like, say for instance, I missed the gym this week because like had a family emergency. I didn't tick off my gym goal, but I ticked off the being a good family member goal. So like, even though you didn't tick one off, you can still achieve something else that still contributes to you becoming a better person in some way. So that's potentially one of the benefits they mentioned there.
100%. It allows you to have multiple ways to basically give yourself a pat on the back that you've still headed towards the right direction, which is just, good vibes.
So that gets into the equifinality versus multifinality.
Well, do we want to go through the layers perfectly first? Because I just did that like top layer, and then the middle layer that I was talking about then was intermediate. But then the subordinate, the lower level. Do you want to kind of go through that stuff?
I'll just like round out the characteristics of the superordinate goals that we didn't quite touch on. So identity based, that's the first characteristic. Second characteristic is extended temporal perspective. So it's not the here and now. It's like it makes you think more long term, and across a broad scope of context. So like we just mentioned, even if I'm not hitting my like gym goals, I'm hitting my be a good person goal. And potentially what you're doing right now, riding a bike, doing the podcast, is ticking off a couple of goals across a broad scope of context. So that's that's a little tick for Steve's superordinate goal.
Win for the good guys.
Win for the good guys. Rack it up. So intermediate goals are things that are going to directly feed into that. So for instance, if your main goal is to be happy, your next kind of level down the hierarchy is I want to be healthy. So your intermediate goal could be improving cardiovascular ability, improving like strength levels, getting 8 hours sleep, managing my stress levels, all those things are going to contribute to you being healthy. And based off those intermediate goals, we then move into subordinate goals, which are your here and now goals. How is what I'm going to do now, what I'm going to do in this week, in this month, or whatever you want to time it in. How is that going to contribute to my intermediate goal? And then how is that going to contribute to my superordinate goal? So cool. Another different characteristics between superordinate goals and the subordinate goals is potentially that superordinate goals, you'll never actually tick off. You'll never achieve them because they're either an identity that you want to maintain or something that you're always working on getting better. Whereas a subordinate goal, you can say, yep, this week I'm doing 2 gym sessions because that's going to feed into my strength and my aerobic capacity. It's going to make me sleep better because I know when I exercise, I sleep better, puts me in a better mood. So I'm going to be a better family person. Those subordinate goals can feed into all the intermediate goals if you tee it up well enough. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add on subordinate goals?
No. So that's right. That is where I guess our SMART goals, and if we take it back to maybe the rehab context that a lot of our listeners might be, however many there are, I think there's me, you, your mum, a couple other people. But what they might be interested in being sometimes our limb symmetry indices and all that type of stuff, those numbers alone don't actually mean anything to the person who we are talking to. But we often set a goal around that. I want you to be able to achieve, say, 75% limb symmetry index in kind of 3 weeks' time through doing the strength training that we're doing. So that's a SMART goal because that is going to allow you to, intermediate goal, be able to run more, again, without compensation. So we're going to be able to do return to running because then they have all those other ones that feed there because that's going to get them to be able to play football because that's going to kind of go towards the overall big thing that they want.
So it's just working up the hierarchy.
That's how we might use it more in clinic. Whoa.
No, the phone is down. It's going to have to jump off the bike. You didn't break your screen, did you?
No.
Lucky.
I'm all good. All good.
Everyone pretend that didn't happen.
Nah, it happened.
And look, that's probably a good takeaway from this podcast. If you don't get anything else from it, shit happens.
I'm back. The lad's back.
All right. Where were you?
I was just saying that is probably more a way that people use it in a day-to-day rehab context. And then I always say to my new grads when I'm talking about this, that don't feel bad that not every single person you have to have this deep why conversation. Obviously it would be amazing and it probably would stop a lot of misuse of health resources and all these type of things. But sometimes a person with acute right neck who comes in with and it's going to be good in 1 to 2 sessions or 3, a week it's gone kind of thing. You're probably not going to get to the kind of the underlying whys of why they want their neck to feel better and all that type of stuff. And that's okay. It wasn't needed for what they were after, you know what I mean? So it's there are times, this is a very powerful tool when you get a chance to use it because it keeps someone engaged in a journey. But I guess not everyone always needs to be engaged in a healthcare journey. Sometimes the best thing for them is to get out of your sight as soon as they can. You know what I mean? So
and it's also because if you're getting into the superordinate goals, those goals at the top that are identity based, it can be quite personal. And if you've only got 1 or 2 sessions with them, then you would have to have built a pretty great rapport with them to be kind of getting them to reflect on why they're doing this, blah, 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 without putting them off or making them feel like you're being super intrusive And a lot of people don't particularly want that. If you're going to be with them for a long time, then yeah, maybe sow the seeds about like, okay, this is why we're going to do this. This is why we're going to do this. And then if you've given them some shorter term, intermediate type goals, then you can kind of discuss as you go what their superordinate goals are, so you can tweak it as you go.
There are times where I've, and like one today, really good example. So I've only seen this person twice, but the importance of knowing the deeper stuff has been way more important than we actually haven't really done. Like it was around eating disorder and around, so an athlete, around eating disorders and around exercise behavior type of stuff, and working with the psychologist and all these things, but with like a hip issue. But I was like, that's the easiest thing. We're not, like, realistically, I now shouldn't be and can't be like doing stuff for that hip, because it doesn't matter what we do, it's not really going to get better until so we kind of were starting more at that middle range and poking into the deeper why stuff, as guided by like psychologists saying, yeah, it's okay to kind of talk about these kind of really deeper things, but at least that middle ground of like, why do you enjoy this sport? Why, like all of these type of things that kind of to build into like going, okay, how can we use aspects of that intermediate goal level to make sure that we are setting appropriate or having good shorter term subordinate goals that aren't going to feed into unhealthy behaviors up higher because of a negative self-view kind of thing. So this stuff is actually really important there. Whereas if I just went and gave her like hip exercises, that would actually be really like a bad thing to do, because it would feed into all these negative kind of self pathways. So we're actually having to go through from session 1, and she was really happy to do this, which was good. Took a lot of opening up. And we did it around like using performance, like kind of as the being like, you know, she wants to perform for her team and wants to perform well and everything. So it was using those goals to see how they might not be congruent with other goals, and kind of discussing that. So sometimes this, even though it's a hip thing, I've just assessed the hip once and really gone, cool, like we need to do all this other stuff, just chat for a couple of hours first before we're really going to do too much with hip. And she's totally bought into it because it's had this thing for like a year or so.
That's awesome, mate. That's I think that's what this paper is getting at as well. The power of like helping people set relevant goals and feed into like the identity that they want to have. If you don't do that, if you don't have that reflective process, like you just said, then we could just give people hip exercises. They come back with something else, and you've still not really addressed their real problem, or you've potentially given them another problem. So I think that was that's an awesome example, mate. So
but it's not very often that you get that.
No. Like this isn't something that I kind of get it. I get to do it with some work cover patients a bit. And that's, I think, hopefully makes it less messy. Sometimes those work cover like dynamics can get super complicated and super messy. But as long as you've got the person you're working with on your side and you're on their side, essentially working towards why they want to go back to work, then yeah, I think that's potentially
the interesting thing I reckon with work cover forces you to focus on subordinate goals, which is their outcome measures. So it forces you back down the hierarchy at all times, kind of thing. So you always have to be able to be like, if you're building that relationship, you've got to be like, this thing that we're filling out is because when we see these numbers change over this time, it's going to say that, hey, it's feeding into this thing that's more important. Rather than it's for its own sake.
This might be a good time to talk about some of the cons of setting subordinate goals, and then into some of the cons of setting superordinate goals as well. Because they're like, it's not all just bliss. Like if you do this, you're going to win. It's there are some cons and some kind of caveats that we have to work around.
Caveat. Sounds yummy.
Yep. Okay. So what are some of the shortfalls or some of the cons to superordinate goals? And like you were just mentioning there with the work cover example, what are some of the shortfalls you can see in just setting or just aiming to tick off subordinate goals?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said superordinate. Yeah, subordinate. Well, yeah, as we kind of usually they're usually an outcome orientated thing rather than a process orientated kind of goal. And usually they're kind of a not a mastery type related goal as well. So the best type of goals for, I guess, your motivation to be more intrinsic are if something is kind of process orientated. So getting better at a process and like getting like mastery of a process, whereas usually those type of things are forcing you to be outcome orientated, which usually sends things over to more extrinsic motivation, because you don't like that doesn't mean anything to you other than I have achieved this number, which you get your little dopamine hit and then it's kind of gone. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's not super meaningful.
Yeah.
Yep. So as they mentioned here in the paper, they've got focusing solely on subordinate goals can lead to short-sightedness. More specifically, subordinate goals can lead to an overly narrow focus of attention. And I see that all the time when it comes to like your work cover clients, where you've tried a treatment and you're trying to figure out what your next decision should be based on an outcome. And there's a bit of post hoc fallacy here of saying, okay, although the decision was probably correct, the outcome isn't what we wanted. But we've become so focused in on that particular outcome that we haven't allowed like the decision making or the process behind it ring true further. And that's where people get rushed in for surgeries, or people get rushed into injections or tests and things like that, where they're just focusing on, let's change the number in this box now, which is usually pain, or let's change the number in this box now, which is your range of motion. But if we're looking long-term, those things potentially don't, or like sometimes they do, there's a reason for all of this stuff, but they don't often outperform some of the other things we've done or some of the things we're already doing, and can potentially get in the way of your long-term.
And with things that are outcome like focused, so short-sighted as well, they also, it's like a pass-fail. So, it doesn't kind of build a lot of self-efficacy if you're like, oh, I failed my goal. Like, sweet. Whereas like if you can build it well to be more process orientated and build it kind of at those higher levels on the goal hierarchy where multiple different goals have that kind of multi-finality so they can build into each other. Well, then it's not a pass-fail. Like tonight, I would normally go and do a bigger gym session, but kind of I'm riding my bike. I'm learning that process of letting go of going, no, I had this session that I would usually do that I had planned. I've still done something that's awesome tonight. And that's like learning in my own head to kind of let go of like, but no, it wasn't the perfect thing that you should have done. It's still been awesome for me at the end of the day to go towards that subordinate goal. So it's not like a pass-fail thing. It's a process of learning.
Yep, exactly. It gives you more.
Sorry, go on.
It gives you more flexibility about what you're kind of working on at any given time.
Yep.
And yeah, I suppose that's probably one of the biggest benefits that I can see to superordinate goals is that there's so many there's 50 ways to run a race, or 50 ways to skin a cat, if you will. And we're just working on any of those 50 ways at a given time. The only thing there to be careful of is giving yourself too many goals. Because if you're giving yourself too many goals, it's potentially going to dilute the meaning behind any given goal. And if you
and you can also achieve nothing. You know what I mean?
Correct. Yeah, you spread yourself out too thin.
Yep. Because like innately, we all do want to achieve things from time to time. So I think it is good to have those subordinate goals that are a little bit set from time to time, that you go, like, I always see it as a bit of a spectrum. Like, you're never trying to be solely over it. No, I'm only going to be like pie in the sky, and you never want to be solely over at like, no, I'm going to be, and we see this all the time coming into clinic. Like, and I, like, one of the examples I give in my course is like, people who are very like numbers orientated in the gym kind of thing. They exist over on the subordinate level, and they don't see that superordinate, intermediate, or superordinate goals could even exist. So they care about that number in the gym on that day, and that's the most important thing for them. And they'll push themselves to that, to the detriment of themselves, because that is the important thing, is getting that hit that I achieved that goal. And that can't last for too long. But also, if you're someone who needs to like achieve anything really of any substance, I guess, it doesn't really work to have only like real airy fairy, like where you could, yes, there's a million ways to skin a cat, but then like if we talk like your stress recovery adaptation, you also spread yourself so thin that you never really adapt to too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're talking in physical sense.
Yeah, correct. And that's the first drawback they mention in this paper as well. A specific endpoint allows a person to track progress in goal pursuit. If you've got something so airy-fairy or something so spread out and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, then you're probably not getting anywhere.
Like, I knew I read this paper 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you're all over it, mate. So they say, first, a specific endpoint allows a person to track progress in goal pursuit and to notice and address discrepancies which foster motivation to pursue the goal. So actually feeling like you're achieving something is still super important. And that's why they're saying to use these two lots of goals together in their hierarchy. If people perceive a very low likelihood of goal attainment, they might get discouraged and stop pursuing the goal. So if you just set the end stage goal without stepping stones on how to get there, you're going to fall off the wagon super fast. And that would be a drawback of setting only superordinate goals, like you just mentioned.
Especially if you haven't, like, which not many people have, and I don't even think I probably have properly had that, like, sit down and actual, like, your real philosophical kind of think about life and about, like, who you are and why, like, your values for, like, being here, you know what I mean? Which we're too busy, most of us, to do that these days. So unless you, like, have that super duper strong, like, you do need those wins along the way to kind of go, oh yeah, I have this, but I do like these little wins.
It's the spectacle getting in the way, mate.
That's it.
The spectacle. But no, it's good. And the paper just goes heavily on that yes, there are drawbacks to both of them, but they don't think there's many when used together. So if you're using both, make sure to use both, set both with your clients, set both with yourself. If you've got to do it, you have to reflect on your superordinate goal, and you have to set stepping stone goals to get there. But there are smaller goals which are going to contribute to bigger goals. And if you don't do that, you're probably not.
A big thing I'd like to kind of bring up as well, that in any one time, it's very likely someone's superordinate goal exists as to where they want to be. But different events in life and all different things can change that. And you will notice that in so, like, especially coaching athletes, building long relationships, like if we're talking the one that I had with Jess, like, we reflect quite often on like why squash, and that why can change from time to time, which means that you might see that there might be a little dissonance going on. Oh, why aren't, like, not really adhering to this type of exercise too much anymore, or whatever, like, what's going on? It might be that no longer actually meets into up to that superordinate goal like it used to, you know what I mean? And then it goes, cool, well, there's going to be other ways and things that are going to comport better with that, because your superordinate goal has shifted slightly, you know what I mean?
Yep. Goals are fluid. People, you want to be someone different, or you learn more and you change, your priorities change, all that kind of stuff. So it takes regular reflection to keep on top of that.
Yep, which we probably won't do with a lot of patients, because that's a long-term relationship.
Yep. But yeah, like you mentioned with your long-term athletes like Jess, perfect opportunity. And hopefully she would have learnt that off you as well, and potentially have her own reflections long into future about who she wants to be, and is what I'm doing helping that or not? So yeah,
Cool.
builds that self-efficacy. Yeah, I think they then talk about some of those little atomic habits type stuff where like your intention actions and all that kind of stuff, they help you achieve your subordinate goals a little bit differently. I don't think we'll get into that too much.
No.
But yeah, I've just read Atomic Habits, and I went in thinking, this is one of those, this guy's selling me something. I should be skeptical about it. And like, yeah, it's based in quotation mark science, but at the same time, like he is selling, this is the way. And he's got like 18-point checklist on how to do it. Doesn't mean that all of his ideas are like nullified, but yeah, I think I did take some things out of the book, and I'd probably recommend it for if you're going to achieve your subordinate goals, how to go about it. But he does start with like, figure out who you want to be, what's your identity, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a lighter read than this paper. Then if you want to get into that, it's probably, it's not a bad introduction to this kind of stuff. At the end, they said, in summary, both superordinate and subordinate goals should be focused on. Long-term goal pursuit through multiple processes, increased long-term motivation, effort while pursuing the goal, inhibition of competing goals, distractions and temptations, stimulation of behavioral consistency can inhibit compensation effects, strengthening of resilience, and help to aid with obstacles, failures, and setbacks. So that is why to essentially do both of these types of goal setting. They did say recommendations for future research. None of these things have been kind of pit against each other. So that's something that will be interesting to see. People who only set subordinate goals versus people who only set superordinate goals versus people who do both. That would be, I think
time course would play into things as well.
Say again?
So I think time course would play into things. So like if the research was done over a short time course versus over a long time course, I think we would see different results, which would be interesting, which is also how we applicably use it, I believe.
So what else did they say? Can you think of anything else that needs to be researched in this area?
No, mate. It would be cool to see it develop, because I really want to teach this rather than SMART goals.
Yeah, for sure. It's it seems like a more
moves slowly.
Yeah, I think so. It seems more sensical. Like it resonates more with me, and that's a bias I've got. But it was because I think for anyone listening, that Stronger by Science podcast really just put things into perspective about how to use these goals.
Hopefully we did as well.
Hopefully we did. Yeah, it's a good paper. It's kind of long. It's got some really good tables in it. They summarize like most of the main points really well. So I think it was a pretty well written paper. They got their points across and kind of covered all bases, and then went through what they needed to in terms of, although we think this, it still needs to be studied properly. This is just our theory at the moment. It was kind of they observed all of the current evidence and then came up with a hypothesis that needs to be tested in the future, and we need to go about doing that. So I think it's a pretty cool paper, and I think definitely pragmatic in terms of things you can do already. And hopefully for the listeners out there, you've taken something from it and potentially have been able to reflect on some of your own goals, or reflect on some of the instances where you could use this in your goal setting with some of your clients or the people you work with.
Hopefully we'll combine this with ACLs or something soon. Yeah,
I think it's going to be it's a key part of like any working with someone. So I think it's going to be a theme that pops up a lot. We've talked about it before, about mentioning it in other episodes, but we just hadn't really covered it first. So keep an eye out in future episodes for this concept. But yeah, super useful. So
enjoy.
Thanks, guys. That was another episode of the RPE podcast. Hopefully not too much of an RPE 10. If you were watching on YouTube, then well done. Steve was moving around everywhere. We had a phone drop as well.
Fell off a bar.
But if you have made it this far through the podcast, please leave us a rating or a review of some sort, because it helps drive traffic to the podcast. We've had
1 star.
Yeah, even 1 star, like that's a start. I don't mind. We'll give you a shout out, or we'll take the feedback on board. But yeah, definitely we would love if you could share the podcast or give it a like, rating, etc. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Gotcha.